Welcome to Measurably Better Learning, the podcast built for learning and development professionals. Whether you're an instructional designer, L&D professional, or corporate leader, get ready for insights and ideas that will transform your approach to learning, training, and development. So let's dive in. Welcome to the Measurably Better Learning podcast, and my guest today, as is often the case, is my friend and my colleague Miriam Taylor. Our topic today is curriculum mapping, and this is a sort of part of a series that we're doing on the skills and abilities and types of people that you need to become a learning leader. And curriculum mapping is a big part of that conversation, and quite honestly, sometimes a little convoluted.
Yeah.
And misunderstood, or maybe better yet, different people mean different things when they use those terms. Miriam, talk to us about what is curriculum mapping. What do you mean when you use that term?
Yeah, sure. So when we talk about being a curriculum, I'm going to say it, a curriculum mapper. That's a terrible way to say it.
No, we can't.
No, I know. When you lead curriculum mapping, what we're talking about really is creating a scope and sequence. And so it's a strategic role, a scope and sequence for content. It might just be for one program. It might be for all your programs, but it's a flexible tool that allows you to create visual alignment with your objectives, and it provides order and structure so you can see gaps, you can see redundancies, and then you have opportunity to really plan for future scaling as well. So in a nutshell, and when I say a flexible tool, I mean we use like a spreadsheet. So it's not anything fancy, or maybe a Miro board, some sort of like visual, but it's literally a working document tool.
The ability to see is really the key.
Yeah.
And something you said I think is important too, because sometimes I think of curriculum mapping as at one level.
Oh, right. Sure.
It's different people play different roles in it, because the top leader has to think of how this whole system all fits together, and are there clear pathways to things?
Yeah.
And is it logical that I took class 1A and then 1B, right? And there's that level, and then there's other levels in there too. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the highest level, which is where I'm picturing the learning leader, they need to understand how to facilitate that kind of conversation. They might, and that's a huge part of what we do at Ingenuity, but being able to pull in the right people, right? But a learning leader needs to set up that tool, understand what they're looking for, and then with the people on their team, be able to say, okay, here's our leadership program, or let's take onboarding. Here's onboarding. We have 6 sub-strands within it, and then we have 3 different kinds of people entering in different pathways.
Right.
So we have a complicated document. But we can walk through and document what are the course, and they're not, I don't even say courses, it's experiences. Because they might take a small online course, but then maybe they're shadowing someone, and then they're doing a checklist, and they're meeting with a mentor. So there's all kinds of experiences that can be pulled into that.
Yep.
And it's the learning leader's job to know how to facilitate that conversation, not necessarily have all the answers. But they need to, and maybe they don't call it a curriculum map, maybe it's just a map.
Right.
But pulling the team together to create this visual plan that we have for moving forward is really their job.
And the part you emphasized on it being visual, you've said that several times. I've watched you do this. So I've been part of these where you're leading a company through a curriculum map. And it's very convoluted in the conversation, right? Because they bounce around. They go here and they go there. But, that's all being captured and then sorted and bucketed. And I think even if you stopped at the bucketed part, it wouldn't be as good. And then suddenly this Miro board, it doesn't have to be world-class graphics. Sometimes it is.
Right.
But it's like, oh, got it.
Yep.
And it's very different from, drive 2 miles, take a left at the rock, then you're going to come to a schoolhouse versus, what I'm able to see in my car. I can actually see where I am. I can see where I'm progressing. I see where I started. I see where I'm going. And that visual part of this, I think, is key. And I think it's fairly common for learning leaders not to have that clear in their head.
Right.
You're doing next.
Yep.
Maybe next isn't the right thing. Maybe next is the exact wrong thing.
Yeah, no, that's a huge part of it. And again, depending on the size of your team, you might have multiple people working on various parts of projects, and so they're not even aware. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing, and that's okay because you do have immediate things that have to happen. But for the learning leader to pull everyone together, I mean, it can be a yearly thing. It could be every 6 months, but just to be able to identify moving into the next year, whatever your next planning period is, where are we at? There's probably things you're not aware of,
right?
Holes, redundancies. So those are important things to capture in that session or sessions.
How about a couple of the topics? What are the standard things that you're always, or nearly always talking about? What are the things that you go, we need to clarify this?
Yeah, definitely. So, and I do want to mention, I think it's April 23rd and 30th. We did 2 podcasts. As you know, on curriculum mapping, like really into the weeds. And we've done webinars. So today what we're looking at is more of like that overarching, role. But I think some of the ones you absolutely can't miss are you need to list the organizational goals and business outcomes. You can lump them together however you want, but we've already talked a lot about that. But if you can't map what you're doing to the larger organization's success, you're not going to have a lot of success and you might not have a job.
Right.
So you have to be able to do that. The other thing is you need to get stakeholders at the table. And this is key. I mean, we just went through one the other day and, it's a huge consensus building session. And sometimes, we ended up adding another session on just because we just needed to get better consensus.
Yeah. There was an alignment at the end of the process. Stay in the process till there's alignment.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the other elements that are part of a curriculum map, and we'll be right back.
Imagine a world where every training session, every learning module, and every translated document is aligned with your company's unique goals and global ambitions. Welcome to Ingenuity, where we don't just talk about elevating your corporate learning, we make it happen. At Ingenuity, we understand the heart of your business is its people. That's why we specialize in creating custom learning solutions and translation services that are not just effective, but are designed specifically for your business's global needs. Let us show you how learning cannot be just better, but measurably better, with solutions tailored just for you. Learn more in the description below.
Welcome back, everybody. Miriam, again, thank you for your thoughts on this. We've talked about some of the key elements of curriculum mapping. We've talked about organizational goals and business outcomes and getting stakeholders involved, but that's not the end of your list, is it?
No. I'd say we typically have 6 or 7 items in a curriculum map. But again, it's almost more, I just saw this again, like I said last week, it ends up being this just very much evolving conversation. So sometimes you know those things, sometimes you don't, which is a whole separate conversation. But organizational values is another one. And I wouldn't say we always include those. In some organizations, that's very evident. But in a lot of places, the learning team has an opportunity to shore up those values, to reinforce them through what they're making. So it's something to consider. What is the learning culture? So that might not even be a column in your spreadsheet or on your Miro board. But I'm telling you, if you don't have a good understanding of how learning is received in your organization, you're just going to keep making the same mistakes.
When you ask that of our clients, do you sometimes just get crickets or they stare at each other for 30 seconds? Like, I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah, it depends on the client. But yeah, because, for example, in some organizations, learning is punitive. Like you make a mistake, so now you have to do this. Or there's a problem, or there's compliance. So it's punishment. It's not an opportunity to upskill or move on. Or maybe it's just boring and terrible and not a great user experience. And so, or maybe they used to all be in person and now they're switching to online. So there's like our eLearning. You have to kind of overcome those hurdles. So learners is another part. And we just, in the last one we did, we thought...
you mean like learner profiles?
Learner profiles, sorry. Okay. Yeah, personas, nailing those down. You usually think you kind of got that, but program to program, that varies.
Yeah.
And even if it's just a 5-minute conversation, are we all on the same page? Like, let's identify who they are. And often it's much longer than that because you need to define learning pathways based on the persona.
And sometimes you're talking multiple languages.
Yes.
multiple cultures, and global locations.
Yes.
Because we tend to work with Fortune 1000 companies, and the learner profile question is never an easy one.
No, it's
because you're always creating caricatures.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And making assumptions.
Yeah.
But the more diverse geographically and culturally, the more challenging it is to pull that all into one thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you go from there, of course, into you start to list your topics, and maybe those are topics for a specific program, and then you go to your objectives, or maybe it's topics in the entire learning and development team.
Mm-hmm.
What topics do we have under our purview that we're responsible for?
Yeah.
So that's a very quick, very short explanation. We have a lot more information online.
Do you ever do, at the start of it, are you ever laying out the measurements and the ROI stuff where you say, okay, one of our colleagues, a good friend of both of us, has a wonderful question. I've heard you ask it many times. What does it look like if we win?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have, I think you do, maybe not always, but sometimes to say, okay, we've met the objectives. What would that look like? What would success look like here? And I love that question.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a huge part. It's a flexible tool, right? So that's one of the things we often add, and really we should add all the time, but it kind of depends on the scope of the project and the timeline.
Yeah.
But that's a huge one, and that often comes, you can ask that question when you're looking at business objectives, but it also has to come as you get deeper into the weeds. Okay, what are our topics? How are we going to deliver those? Anymore. Maybe it's all e-learning or maybe it's all, but often it's a whole blended approach.
Right.
So now we have to look at, well, how are we going to measure? And are we just measuring based on completion of a course and in a survey? Yes.
And sometimes that's enough.
And sometimes that's enough. But we can certainly measure a lot more than that, and we should if we can.
Okay. All right. So as a learning leader, this is a system I understand, right? I'm doing curriculum mapping. How wonderful would it be if everybody on my team understood the importance of a curriculum mapping, because they don't.
Right.
Sometimes there are people like, I know what
Just let me do what I'm doing.
I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this for 20 years. I don't need that thing. How do you well, it's kind of know, do, believe, right?
Yeah.
How do you tell them, how do you show them, and how do you get them to embrace this way of thinking?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would say start small, perhaps a portion of a program that you have. And the cool thing about being in learning is that you can model, right? So maybe you lead a session or a portion of a session, but then after it, you almost have this debriefing where you're being very transparent. This is why I did this. This is why I did this. This is why I did this.
Yeah. And what made sense to you? What didn't?
Right.
Where, at what point were you going, wow, why are you doing this?
Right. And even open that up to your team. What was valuable to you? What wasn't? But again, when you have somebody who's really not interested, doesn't see the value of it, that's more of a belief statement.
Yeah, very much.
Right. So you want to kind of attack their pain points. Certainly, they've been involved in a program where it wasn't aligned, and, the right hand didn't, they were developing a piece that didn't align, or it was redundant with a piece over here. And so by attacking the pain points, I think, okay, what has been frustrating to you on projects?
Right.
And then demonstrating this is how a curriculum map can help alleviate that.
Right.
And I think most people on learning and development teams are naturally curious.
Right.
Everybody's excited about what's to come.
Right.
So if we can demonstrate what's to come and the excitement, now we're all organized around it, I think then you have a lot more consensus on using this tool.
Well, that's a great way to end. All right. Thank you, my friend. Before we wrap up the show, if you're looking to dive deeper, we've got tons of free downloads, L&D resources, and details about upcoming webinars that you won't want to miss. They're found in the episode description. Plus, if you ever want to chat with either one of us, now's your chance. You can find links in the episode description to connect directly with Miriam or me. We're here to answer your questions and to discuss all things learning and development. And speaking of questions, we love hearing from you. Whether it's a question or a comment or a topic you're curious about, or if you just want to join the conversation, drop us a comment on your favorite social media channel. Your input shapes our shows. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. It's the best way to ensure you never miss out on our latest episode. We're excited to continue to transform learning into a measurable success with you. Until next time.